So welcome everyone. Thanks to all the extra people who've come along to be here because it's my birthday edition this month. So this is our 54th story time. And we've got quite a big list of requested topics, which I kind of put into some categories. We have a new patron this month, Alison. Her requests for our overarching topics as a new patron were the themes of displaced, not necessarily in a bad way, and associated misplaced. So we have a few misplaced and oddly placed things around. There seems to be some washing here. Bunny, I don't know what Patch Bunny is doing. And I don't know if Dad's been displaced from somewhere where they wear kerchiefs on their head, but something's going on there. Related to that, Mum put in the angel's share as in the bit that disappears, not necessarily the original source of that, which is specifically with alcohol, the bit that disappears in brewing. And then there were a lot of things that were related to things that are very old. So when you finally replace something and it makes you realize how much it needed replacing, the clothing that finally has to go, when your thing that you think is ancient and redundant has become a valuable antique, and the phrase used to refer to classics or old media of dead people's music, art, books, etc. And then there were some things that were kind of about doing things without the proper guide or instructions. So kids' versions of adult games where they haven't quite got it right. When you leave out a vital ingredient or instruction in a recipe, and attempting to pack with no list to guide you and putting stuff on the list retrospectively. So our little opening poem today is called Knock-on Effect. Breathe deep. The air inside rises, taking possession, ribs making way. The wind washes onward, the seeds that have settled, towed to new territory, displaced, then deposited like the falling rain. The water rises and sands shift, soils shape anew. Sticks and stones are sent to distant shores. Find a piece of home in any riverbed. Read the passing years on any stone. And today's story is called Lost with the Angel's Share. Now, I apologize if as I'm reading, I do a little bit of, because some of my pages may become displaced because this book is not the kind of thing I usually like to write in. It has pages that are designed to be torn out. So apologies if there are some book grabbing sound effects. So Lost with the Angel's Share. For 25 years, Arnav and Amber had lived in their house on the banks of the River Don, watching football, playing croquet, wearing knitted jumpers that Arnav's grandma had made, and keeping their music on the cassette tapes Amber had recorded it onto off of the radio. The radio with cassette player recorder had been old already when the tapes were made, a hand-me-down from Amber's granddad that had strangely fascinated her. She'd delighted in making her own mashups and genuine mixtapes, recording layers of music over and over each other until the pitch changed from the stretching of the polyester. Now she and Arnav used the old machine to play recordings from the radio made almost as long ago as they'd received their first mail at this address. The tapes whined and changed speed and frequently had to be tightened by turning a pencil inside the spools. Sometimes they played only in patches, or not at all, the magnetic coating worn away with the years. Amber found this nostalgic and interesting. Her grandson, Finley, called it listening to dead people's music, because the songs and the tapes were so old. In fact, Finley liked to say that his grandparents owned dead people's paintings and that the contents of their shelves was books by dead people as well. Amber had always liked to collect the classics, and Finley was the kind of child who would pick up a phrase from somewhere and use it for everything he could for months on end. Arnav knew that Amber didn't really perceive any of their things as old. Amber had always liked to disappear into the woods. And no matter how old your books, music, and household items were, they could never be as old as nature. They could never be on the same time scale as the rocks that grew and shed their moss and changed in shape just a little each year from the passage of wind and hoof and soil. Arnav understood, in theory, that the things he and Amber owned were old. But he had been a diver for 15 years, and he'd seen things under the vast dark depths of the ocean that were much, much older. So he understood Amber too. It was a different kind of water that flowed past the balcony of the house on the river, but it was water all the same, and Arnav had always lived in harmony with it. Sometimes, when the water was high, everything on the first floor felt just a little bit damp. But Arnav felt at home with that after 15 years' work on a ship, and Amber felt at home with that because it was just a little bit more like being outdoors. For them, it was fine. They replaced sills and frames when the damp ate them away, until the house itself was a patchwork of old and new, and they said that they liked it that way. They adapted to every quirk and oddity the old building gave them, their habits filling in and covering the problems like sealant. Until one day, it started to rain, and it didn't stop. It didn't stop for 2 weeks. The river displaced objects and plants, which sailed downstream past Arnav and Amber's window. The sound of overflowing gutters and lost debris washing down the river became so familiar that when, on the 14th morning of the deluge, Amber and Arnav woke up to water lapping inside the balcony doors, they didn't immediately notice anything out of the ordinary. Then Arnav murmured, "Oh, your laptop." And Amber finally realized that the water was on their floor, flowing around some work she'd left on the mat beside her desk and lapping at the base of the bookcase. The bottom row of books by dead people were soggy, the pages sticking together. It seemed incongruous to others that Amber, renowned for her love of forests and old books, had worked as a data analyst. She'd bounced around a series of temporary contracts, finding her comfort zone when changing times increasingly allowed her to work from home. This laptop, something of a dinosaur, was a relic of the first job that had let her move to a home office. It might have needed 3 attempts to boot up correctly and taken several minutes per calculation. It did sometimes blue screen, and the charger did need to be jiggled around just so to get the power to flow to the battery. But Amber felt attached to it. It was the machine that had freed her from matching 2-meter cubicle desks and bored, unfriendly colleagues. It was the means by which work and the woods had stopped being quite so far apart. "Oh," she sighed, literally wading across the living room to scoop the laptop from the drowning rug. "Do you think it might still work?" Arnav was giving her a slightly incredulous look. "I think the more pressing question, Amber, is whether our floor is still going to work by the time we get all this water back outside. 15 years of working on a boat might give a person an affinity with water, but it also taught you that when the water was inside, you had a problem." Professional assessment confirmed Arnav's fears. The floor, lower walls, and downstairs appliances would be needing repair or replacement. He and Amber were to be displaced, at least for the time being, from their old house on the river, and some things were going to have to change. One of the things that had to change was a large part of Arnav and Amber's wardrobe. Amber liked having a basket of woolens downstairs in the living room, where jumpers and woolly socks could be donned with ease as the chill of the evening set in. The wicker basket, of course, was no match for the cold river water, which had soaked into the woolens as quickly and thoroughly as spilt drink into paper towel. The result was that the jumpers were now child-sized. The scarves and socks appeared to be for dolls, and the hats would be better used as small cup cozies. It might have made sense to pass these knitted, now felted clothes to small children, had they not already been items of clothing that featured holes, patches, paint spots, frayed ends, and stains. Amber and Arnav liked to hold on to things. The necessity of acquiring new jumpers and warm socks resulted in an overhaul of the contents of the bedroom dresser, which was packed tight with leggings that had lost their elastic, t-shirts with split seams, and black cardigans that had accidentally gained pink spots from splatters of bleach. It felt strange to wear new shirts and jumpers that were all their original colour and fitted like things that hadn't been through years of stretching. Almost as though Amber and Arnav were being displaced even out of the clothes they'd been used to wearing. Everything had to be sorted through, and only the essentials kept. Essentials, Amber had to admit, should probably only include things that actually served their intended purpose. She and Arnav were to be staying in her sister's converted garage, where there would not be room for laptops that did not turn on, or books with pages washed blank by the river's invasion, the words pushed aside by the fierceness of nature. It's what nature does, Amber reflected calmly, as Arnav handed her laptop to the recycling centre employee. We chose to live with the... We were on its territory, not the other way round. She and Arnav went to a large electronics store in town and bought the computer recommended by Arnav's Australian friend Alina, who knew her gadgets. They took the new acquisition temporarily back to their house, and Amber took it upstairs, where she'd been told the wiring was safe, to install everything, while Arnav continued with the packing. She found herself surprised when the machine switched on the first try, and generally did as it was told. A small part of her began to question why she'd held on to the old one all this time, and then she scolded herself for being disloyal. Meanwhile, downstairs, Arnav tried to make a list of the essentials to pack, and then pack them. What he actually did was put things in boxes, and then write them on the list and tick them off with a satisfied nod. This made him feel that he knew what to pack for leaving behind everything he'd known for the last 25 years, when in reality, he had no idea. Life working on a ship didn't prepare you as well for this as you would think. Sure, you packed, you went out to sea for long periods, but it was more like packing for a big holiday, and you always came back to a home that was your base in between. Well, unless you were Grandpa Max, but that's another story. This was more like packing for life. He and Amber had decided not to return when the repairs were done. Living in the river's territory, though beautiful, was like many other beautiful things that are made to be lures, unwise. Arnav wrapped some plates in protective paper and stacked them into a box, just as Amber appeared on the stairs. Her hair, which, although now white-streaked, still had fawn-brown strands, was lit up like a halo by the staircase light, and she was wearing a rather stunned expression. "It just works," she told Arnav, blinking. "What?" Arnav put some bowls alongside the plates. "The laptop," Amber replied. "It just goes." "Yes," Arnav answered, smiling at her. "I believe that's what they're supposed to do." "Do you think that new vacuum cleaner sucks?" Amber asked him, her eyes widening in apparent excitement at the thought. Arnav nodded in mock solemnity. "Yeah, I suppose it probably does." Indeed, the new vacuum cleaner did suck when they finally tested it out on a small rug in their new temporary accommodation. Amber zigzagged around the room, pointing at the clean trail the vacuum cleaner left behind and saying to Arnav, "Once! I went over that bit once," in a delighted, disbelieving tone. There were quite a few such discoveries. Arnav kept finding himself going to hitch up his tracksuit bottoms and then realizing that they actually didn't need to be hitched up. The elastic in them worked. Every time he made a cuppa at the converted garage, he'd be looking for a tin can to hold down the kettle switch for several minutes before he remembered that it did, in fact, remain in place by itself. While they felt unable to actually throw away the old cassette tape player recorder, a lot of the tapes had been damaged by the flood, so there wasn't a lot that could be played on it. Its radio reception had grown patchy at best, and of course it couldn't receive any of the new digital channels. Amber's sister showed them how to attach their phones to the speaker system in the garage and look up their old favourites on Spotify. "There's a lot more bass line than I remember," Arnav remarked. "They seem more in tune," Amber admitted. The cassette player sat like an ornament in the corner, and Amber eyed it periodically with a guilty expression tugging at her features. As they packed and moved things, a strange phenomenon started to occur. Small amounts of many things seemed to go missing. It started with the basket of yarn remnants and fabric scraps that Amber kept in the spare room for craft projects. When she went to pack it up, she was sure the basket was only about 3/4 as full as it had been when she last looked. Then there were the oats, which were kept in a bucket with a lid at the end of the kitchen. They were completely safe and dry after the flood, a testament to the quality of the bucket. But whenever Arnav went to get some out in the mornings afterwards, it seemed to him that more oats were gone than he'd used the day before. These things they might have assumed were just their imagination, if it weren't for the croquet equipment. Amber put their 6 hoops and 3 of the bowls into a box the day after the water invaded. It was Arnav's birthday soon, and Amber's sister had already offered a garden party. Croquet would be nice to have there. But Amber couldn't find the 4th bowl anywhere. She eventually shrugged and told Arnav, "The angels have taken their share," before packing the box away as it was. Arnav looked sceptical, muttering, "I think the river has taken its share," but he otherwise left the subject alone. When Amber got the croquet equipment out again at her sister's, another ball and one of the hoops was missing. "These angels take a pretty big share," she observed, doing her best not to seem cross. Arnav was unimpressed. "The angels' share gets taken from whiskey," he told her crossly. "They don't take oats or bits of yarn or croquet balls. Balls don't evaporate." But there wasn't much to be done about it. The worst of the disappearances was discovered with the last of the packing. Arnav was clearing off the mantelpiece, dropping most of the trinkets into a box for the charity shop and setting aside a few sentimental bits and pieces for their next home. But the main item he'd intended to set aside wasn't there. "Amber," he called into the kitchen, "have you already packed Poseidon's beer mug?" This was, of course, not really a beer mug belonging to Poseidon, at least so far as Arnav knew. It was very old-looking, tarnished copper beer stein that he'd fished out from under a rock at the bottom of the sea in his diving days. This was at great risk of being bitten by a crab who'd decided the beer stein was an essential part of their home decor, and Arnav valued it very highly. Amber poked her head around the kitchen doorframe. "No, I saw it up there yesterday." "You might be in with the teapot and strainers and things," offered their daughter Kelsey, who was helping today, along with the grandchildren, Finley and Tess. "I'm sure it will turn up." But turn up it did not. Nor did Amber's bracelet, which she was unable to find in the drawers of the dressing table later that evening. The bracelet was the first gift Arnav had ever given her, a thin leather band adorned with silver and gold, acorn and pinecone trinkets. It wasn't in the bathroom or fallen down the side of the bed. It wasn't in her handbag or in the little ceramic saucer on the dining table. I suppose it's been lost with the angel's share, Amber sighed, and this time she did look cross. Arnav made her a cup of tea, using the baked beans to keep the kettle switch down. They'd packed the tea strainers, so he had to pour it through a napkin. Later that evening, they both sat in the comfy armchairs Amber's sister had set up in the converted garage, eyeing the cassette player recorder, which was taking up rather a lot of space on their small coffee table. You know, Arnav began in a careful tone, the Heart Foundation might be able to get something for that, as an 80s themed party prop or something. An offended look flashed across Amber's freckled face, but then she sighed. You're right. It's not like we can really use it anymore. So the next morning, they gathered up the cassette player and their few remaining tapes and took them to the nearest charity shop. The volunteer working that morning gave them a skeptical look as she accepted the machine and put it behind the counter in a way that made Amber wonder what its fate would really be. As consolation, Amber wanted to explore the new woods. She and Arnav set off through Amber's sister's village, poking their heads into the little shops that lined the main street on their way. At one end of the main road sat a quirky little antique store. It was the sort of place Amber associated with finding lace doilies and nice teacups. They didn't really need those things, but by force of habit, wandered inside, peering at typewriters and old books with the letters faded on the spine. On a shelf to one side, Arnav spotted some records and went to have a closer look at the cover art. Then he looked up. On a higher shelf, above the records, sat a cassette player and a row of cassettes.
Oh.
The tag attached to the cassette player's handle read, £150. The shelf of tapes said, £5 each. Arnav looked at Amber. She was immersed in inspecting a basket of hats and had not been following him. Tactically, Arnav wandered towards the door, collecting and subtly steering Amber on the way. Apart from Amber getting lost in the new woods a few times, neither Poseidon's beer mug nor Amber's bracelet turning up, and Amber exclaiming whenever she did the vacuuming, things went on fairly uneventfully until the day of Arnav's birthday garden party. Amber had, until now, not needed to use the oven in the converted garage studio. This was owing to a mixture of warmer weather and being still half-based at their waterlogged old house, which had emptied little by little, as though it was letting out a long breath and expelling the human inhabitants with it. Amber had assembled the ingredients for a Black Forest cake, and was quite excited to bake again after weeks of cobbled-together meals and hurried sandwiches eaten sitting on packing boxes. She sifted flour and cocoa, and even stewed cherries from scratch on the small two-plated gas burner. Then she inspected the oven. It was a much more modern appliance than she'd owned before, and setting the temperature in correct mode took some working out, but she found the right dials and buttons in the end. Amber glanced at the recipe she'd been roughly following and saw that it suggested 20 minutes cooking time. In Amber's old oven at the house on the river, that meant an hour, but she assumed this appliance was a bit more efficient and so settled for a 30-minute timer. Recipes never gave quite enough time for anything. Amber began to tidy up the small kitchen space, sweeping up flour and putting ingredients back into boxes. Her eyes fell on an unopened bag of sugar. She cursed. Oh, well, perhaps if she made a sweet syrup to pour over the cake under the icing, that would keep it from being bitter. Amber set about mixing something for this purpose, then wiped down the counter and went out into the garden to set up the trestle table. Her attention was pulled back from collecting herbs 10 minutes later by the shrill screaming of the smoke alarm. Amber raced back inside, pulling open all of the minimal windows and the main sliding door, and opened the oven to find the cake blackened like charcoal. Arnav rushed in from the house, looking alarmed. I guess the oven just works too, Amber lamented. Arnav looked at the black cake. You made a very literal Black Forest cake there, Amber, he commented. Just add some twigs. Amber shot him a glare. Let's see if the burnt part can be cut off. She got a knife and tried to slice the edges away. There was a soft plink sound as the knife struck something small and hard inside the cake, and Amber's determined expression faded. Oh, she said, I think I was probably meant to get the stones out of the cherries at some point.
Oh.
Arnav laughed. How about we air this place out for a while and go and get a cake from the bakery, he proposed. When they returned, a few family members and friends were already milling about with cups of tea and squash. In the middle of the lawn were Finley and assorted friends and locals, kids and grandkids. They were playing croquet. Except it wasn't really croquet. They had all the hoops lined up in a long tunnel, and one child at the end waiting for the balls like the catcher in cricket. The object seemed to be to get the ball to go all the way to the other end in one shot, and the balls were being hit with Amber's sister's hockey stick instead of a mallet. Put the cup down, ordered Finley, as the next child lined up their shot, and the catcher child squatted down and pointed Arnav's Poseidon beer mug towards the hoop tunnel, opening forwards. The ball was hit and sailed spectacularly along the line of hoops and into the beer mug with a clatter. The assembled children and some of the adults clapped, and the child who had hit the ball went forward and held the ancient beer mug aloft, beaming proudly. Arnav chuckled. Oh, I see, he said, clapping along with everyone else. It's Poseidon's croquet. And so the game was dubbed well into the future. Amber got herself a cup of tea and a slice of cake and sat comfortably under a tree at the end of the garden, where the river, not called the Don here, but connected to the same, flowed by beyond the back fence. Arnav was joining in the game of Poseidon's croquet, his new green knitted jumper, free from patches and fitting smartly, matching the shady parts of the lawn. Perhaps, Amber reflected silently, being displaced had helped them to move forwards. There was always a way forwards that needed to be taken. That was something that the river and the forest knew. Just as she was thinking this, Amber saw a flutter of movement on top of the back fence, and a duck landed there and then clumsily descended to the lawn, quacking and looking around expectantly for scraps. There was a glimmer of something shiny against its breast feathers, as though the duck was wearing a necklace. Amber frowned, standing up and approaching to get a closer look. The Poseidon's croquet game stuttered to a halt as the duck was spotted and bits of afternoon tea were proffered in its direction. Amber knelt down and offered the duck some cake, and as she did so, carefully reached out a hand to lift the leather cord that had somehow ended up around the bird's neck, her missing bracelet. Amber looked up at Arnav, who shrugged and grinned. I guess the angels are sharing with us in return, he said.
Yay.
Very good. Very good.
Yes. All right.
Glad there was a duck.
Yes, good duck.
I can imagine a duck stealing a bracelet, but I can't imagine a duck stealing like multiple croquet balls and hoops and stuff.
No, because the duck didn't steal them.
No.
The children.
So there's still a mystery.
The children stole them, yeah, to invent a new game.
Yeah.
Were the oats part of the duck?
Yeah. So
Yeah, who stole the oats?
oats, and the duck took the like
Oh,
and stuff for nest material. Yeah.
mhm.
I would like to see the duck nest. That would be
Duck
interesting.
nest.
Yeah, colourful
It
patchwork.
would look very nice, wouldn't it? Be all
Maybe that's an illustration.
yeah. Maybe that's the illustration for this story when it
Yeah.
eventually.
Mm.
With a croquet ball instead of an egg.
Yes.
And it's taking a very long time to hatch, Emily.
Yeah. So, are there some requests for September's story topics?
Mm.
Yeah, I've got one that comes to mind. I always give you ones from what I'm studying at uni. So this month I request tectonic plates.
Tectonic plates. Ooh.
Mm.
Ooh, we've seen some of those.
Board games. Okay. Yeah.
Misplaced directions from Google.
Missing directions from Google.
Well,
Like
no,
misleading misdirections. Yeah.
I don't know if it would be possible to put it in, but delayed flights and missing connections.
No.
Kind of links into what I was thinking. Today I went to the University Engineering Open Day, and so I was thinking, you know, in there was one about how, as well as cybersecurity, there's like electromagnetic spectrum security, and they did a little demonstration how they could make it look like there was a plane above Adelaide Airport called Aliens. Yeah, so I don't know how they'll pick, but my general thing was going to be like computer nerdy stuff, which could fit in with Emily's science stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe Mum will back me up on this one. We were just watching a murder mystery that's got UFOs in it. Maybe UFO should be a prompt.
UFO.
They're pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You like the duck, right? You want the duck
The
day.
feeding duck.
Well, we can only
I mean,
duck if it's set next
If you don't realize it's a duck, it could be an unidentified flying object, because until you identify it, you don't know.
Or the alien overlord.
Well, that's a bit Adam Douglas.
Yeah,
The duck is actually like some super intelligent being that's
Yeah.
in charge of everything.
It's believable.
Yeah. Okay. Any others? Or is that all for now? You can always message me further things if you have any other requests.
What about the wrong chocolate?
The wrong chocolate, like as in you think you're getting dark and it's a sweet
No,
one,
get one
or
of those selections.
Oh.
Yeah.
the wrong chocolate, as in when you pull something out, you think it's
This will be hazelnut.
hazelnut.
Life is like a box of chocolates.
You should look up, there's a thing in Sweden that's similar to like how we have the favorites chocolates, and I think it's called an Aladdin's chocolate box, and it's a really common like thing you bring to Christmas and stuff like that, like a favorites box, but there are really specific rules about how everyone has to eat them, because it's got like multiple layers, and you can't have what's on the bottom layer until you eat all of what's on the top layer, but there are some that no one wants, so someone has to like be sacrificial and eat the ones that no one wants, so you can get to the second layer of the chocolate box.
Chocolate eating,
Yeah, like
sharing
very
etiquette.
specific ritual etiquette. Yeah.
Oh, no, I think you could build that into a board game where if you kind of do a bad thing, you've got to have one of those unfavored
Sort of like a drinking game, but yeah, if
Yeah.
you do something that's against the rules, you have to have one of the bad
Yeah.
chocolates.
Get the raspberry and peanut pudding.
Have you ever played the Revels game? So you each take, you know, the Revels chocolates where they're all like different flavors, but it's quite hard to tell them different. And you each take one, and whoever gets the coffee loses. And the last person to get a coffee one gets to eat the rest of the bag, but by then oh, yeah, we used to play that as kids.
Okay. I love it. All right. Well, that sounds fun.
Well, what about a feeling I've had when you travel somewhere new and you're really sure it's out of a movie set, you know, so
But like they definitely filmed.
Midsummer movie.
Yeah.
Every English town,
Every-
70 people are going to die and no one's going to worry about it.
Well, what about that thing that happened when we went to Sherwood Forest? And I was
Looks like died here.
that actress.
Yeah.
Sort of kind of related. You know, when you're like absolutely confident about something, like I've been here, or that's that thing from that thing, and then it turns out you are so wrong.
Yeah.
And you're like, but I was convinced. Yeah.
Or really tenuous connections where you're like, this is kind of related to my show because that person's wearing the same jacket. I wasn't wrong. You know?
All right. So that's good for topics, and I'll just check when it is. I think it's the 10th of September, because having done some dates Jenga this month, about next month, I remember quite clearly when it's meant to be. Yes. So the 10th, there are no daylight savings changes or anything between now and then, so it will be at the same time, 10 a.m. for UK and 6:30 for Adelaide. And I don't know what it is for Melbourne, Elise. Is it 7? Yeah.
The duck back in as well.
You want that duck? All right. The duck. I'll just put the duck on the list of topics. We know which one I mean. All right. So see you to people watching retrospectively. We'll see you next on the 10th of September. Thanks for watching.